Hey everybody, I'm Derek, and in today's video we're going to be going over a 6-week and 3-day review of my MacBook Air. For the rest of this video, I'm going to be giving you my experience on how it felt to be a full Windows end user switching over to Mac OS. We'll go into some of the learning curves that I had, the capabilities of this slim and portable laptop, and whether or not if this M4 MacBook Air actually met my expectations. So let me go ahead and get the elephant out of the room. I completely lost track and actually forgot to do a 1-month review for the MacBook Air. My MacBook Air is the M4 edition or the M4 processor, and this came out earlier in 2025. I'd have to say that this is probably the best spent money I have ever put on any computer. So as a new MacBook user, the first thing I had to get used to was the operating system. Apple's Mac OS versus Microsoft's Windows OS, they're just completely two different beasts. While Mac tends to excel in pretty much everything Windows does, there's just a little bit more muscle memory when I'm using Windows machines, because that's what I've been using for the last 30 years. I've literally only been using Mac OS for the last 6 weeks and 3 days, and even though there is a slight learning curve to learning how to use Mac OS, Apple has done a fantastic job with just making sure that anyone who's starting to use their Mac devices, being that the MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air, the Mac Mini, the operating system across all the platforms are going to be generally the same, if not almost identical. You'll find yourself kind of scratching your head a little bit because some of the things that we're used to doing in Windows is not the same way in Mac. So because the operating system of the MacBook Air is so well optimized, Apple has really built all of the hardware and software and really just made kind of the perfect machine. And with the marrying of the optimization for the hardware and the software, you'll find out that this MacBook has phenomenal battery life. Again, I've had this MacBook Air for 6 weeks and 3 days, and honestly, I've probably charged it once a week. Keep in mind that I'm only really using this MacBook Air for mainly content creation. I could easily start off with my battery at 100% with this MacBook Air, and then after a few hours at editing a 4K 60 video, honestly, the battery would be at about like 80%. That's again, hours later. If that was a Windows machine, I mean, honestly, from my experience with Windows laptops, it's never been that good. The performance on the MacBook Air with the new M4 processing chip is just amazing. There are different configurations that you could purchase this MacBook Air with configurable RAM or storage. The base RAM configuration for this M4 MacBook Air is actually going to be 16 gigabytes of RAM. This unified RAM that the MacBook Air is using actually makes everything buttery smooth. Doing any of their preparatory tasks to make videos such as writing scripts, taking notes, doing research, the list kind of goes on and on and on. The MacBook Air doesn't ever struggle. So it's safe to assume that if you're looking at the MacBook Air to do any type of just professional work, maybe it's your regular office computer or what have you, the MacBook Air is not going to let you down. But for my specific MacBook Air, I actually got 24 gigabytes of RAM, which is just phenomenal because this MacBook Air just chews through everything. Again, keeping in mind that I'm using my MacBook Air for 99% to do video editing, and my video editing standard is 4K 60. Unless there's some type of weird hiccup, I don't ever record or put videos on YouTube with lesser quality. Now, I'm sure that every other YouTuber on the platform has mentioned that this MacBook Air is perfect for video editing. But what about those people who aren't doing video editing? What about those people who are just doing PowerPoint documentation? Or maybe you're using this for real estate, or maybe you're using it for other tasks outside of content creation. And again, the MacBook Air will not let you down. Now, one of the things I was super skeptical about was the fact that the MacBook Air doesn't have a fan. I'm not sure if you saw my initial unboxing video, but this MacBook Air, there's no fans at all. There are no openings or ports except for the USB-C ports. For those of you who aren't familiar as to why I was skeptical or why it's important to have a fan in a laptop is because video editing can actually be a heavy workload on a computer, and a heavy workload equates to heat, and heat with your technology is never a good mix. Now, all that to say is the fact that even though the MacBook doesn't have a fan, it doesn't really slow down. There is this thing called thermal throttling on the MacBook Air. Essentially what happens is if your MacBook Air gets too hot, then it's going to reduce performance, about 10% performance, which isn't too bad. I mean, I was doing some 4K edits on this computer. It got hot, which actually wasn't really hot. It was more just like an elevated warm. And honestly, if it was thermal throttling itself, I didn't notice a difference. The 10% difference from the thermal throttling, if it was even that, I feel like it didn't stop me. It didn't slow me down at all. Now, in terms of performance, some of you might be gamers and you might be thinking to yourself, hey Derek, how does the MacBook Air perform with gaming? Honestly, I couldn't tell you that because of the fact that I didn't do any type of gaming on the MacBook Air. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm using my MacBook Air mainly for video editing content creation. But I have seen other YouTubers who have done a stress test for the gaming capabilities of this MacBook, and I wasn't disappointed based off of their research. Another reason why I haven't actually done any gaming on my MacBook is kind of twofold. Number one being that I would have to get my favorite game in the Mac OS version. All of my PC games are in Windows, and I don't got the money to buy the same exact game but on a different operating system. And the second reason is because games take up storage space, which is the perfect segue to go ahead and talk about storage. Now, I purchased this MacBook from Costco. Again, it has 24 gigabytes of RAM and it has the M4 chip, but I didn't opt to get the higher storage capacity. So I'm in the middle of the configuration for the storage where I have 512 gigabytes. Video editing with A-roll and B-roll, audio, and just all these other things, it can take up quite a lot of space on your storage of whatever computer it is. And so that is one thing that I do recommend if you are looking for this MacBook Air, is to make sure that you get an external hard drive, or if you already have an external hard drive, then you're already ahead of the game. Because economically, it's cheaper to buy an external hard drive that has 2, 3, 4 terabytes of external storage versus paying a similar, if not a more expensive price to have only 500 gigabytes more that's actually built into your MacBook Air. If you do go the route of the external hard drive, make sure you do your YouTube research and check on Amazon to make sure that you're getting an external hard drive that can do really quick data transfer. So in regards to where you purchase your MacBook, it could be Apple, it could be Best Buy, it could be Costco. Apple's new 2025 MacBooks have some really decent colors. You have the classic gray MacBook, and then you have the midnight black MacBook like I have. And then you have this new, what they call sky blue color, and that's basically a grayish blue MacBook Air. And I honestly didn't like it, even though it was cool to technically have 2 different color laptops under one lid. I personally like the stealthy looking things, devices, cars, so I personally went with the midnight black. I have the 15-inch configuration for the MacBook Air, and I would have to say it's the perfect size. The screen is nice and vibrant, and while it's not OLED, it's still really nice. Any type of visual issues when I'm actually doing my video editing, because everything is super clear. And the 15-inch MacBook Air is actually going to get you about 3 pounds of weight. But if you opt for the smaller 13-inch MacBook Air, you can't go wrong either. All right, so let's talk about some learning curves for me as I started to learn how to use Mac OS. The first thing is going to be the keyboard. The keyboard feels really good. And while this isn't exactly a learning curve because it is a QWERTY keyboard in the United States, it feels, it types, the finger travel, it's all really good. The kind of tactileness of each of the buttons, the fingerprint reader, or I think they call it a Touch ID, it's just all really good. But there are a few things that kind of throw me off. And the first thing I'm gonna say is going to be the Command key. Since I'm a longtime Windows end user, I've been growing up and using the Control key on my keyboards. You know those shortcuts like Control Z? Come on, don't act like you haven't used a keyboard shortcut for Control Z. But the thing is between the Control key and the Command key is the fact that they're just kind of in the same place, but not in the same place. So when I'm typing, I'll actually kind of press on this other key, which looks like a globe or the function key on the MacBook Air. And I do like the globe or the function key. And of course, because I'm a longtime Windows end user, I'll press with my little pinky finger here on the what would be the Control key, but on the MacBook Air, it's actually the FN key, I guess the function key. But in order for me to actually use Control Z, I would actually have to press Command Z or whatever keyboard shortcut. And the Command key is ever so slightly to the right of where the Control key would be, and it just throws me off. Also, the MacBook Air keyboard has other kind of functions that I don't know what they do, like the Options key or the Control key or the FN key. I think I accidentally pressed the FN key once and it brought up like emojis. And I'm like, what? Why do I want to put an emoji here? I don't know, it's just weird, right? The fact that Apple has a dedicated emoji key, or am I just crazy? The backlit keyboard on this MacBook Air is really good. It operates as it should. And the backlit keyboard is actually pretty bright because even in well-lit areas, like right now with my soft light here and my other soft light over there, I can actually still see the keyboard lit up. Now you can customize the backlit keyboard to make it brighter or dimmer, but I mean, honestly, I'm paying for it. I might as well have it on the entire time. I wonder if I did turn it off, would the battery be better? Not like it matters because the battery is already amazing. So now in regards to the MacBook keyboard, I hear that there's a lot of people out there that say that there's like a little oily shine on their keyboard after a few months, a few years of using their MacBook. And honestly, I can kind of see that. I've went through and actually kind of polished the keyboard with some alcohol wipes, and it worked a little bit, but I'm actually hearing that this is a larger issue. As in, Apple charges you almost an arm and a leg for their expensive MacBook computers, but then there's like a gloss or something, kind of a sheen, if you will, on the actual keyboards that wear off, which equates to the shiny, oily look. So even though I'm starting to see like that shiny look, I'm hoping it doesn't get worse because, I mean, honestly, Apple, this is an expensive device. Why is it that after 6 weeks and 3 days that I'm actually starting to see that shiny residue or the lack thereof on the keys? It's just an eyesore. And that's probably my biggest gripe on this MacBook Air so far. The same thing can be said to be true for the trackpad. The trackpad is huge, it's super tactile, it's nice and smooth, it's reactive, and there's a whole bunch of gestures that you could use with the trackpad, which is another learning curve for me. But again, with Apple's intuitive kind of tutorials, you actually start to master how to use the proprietary software with the trackpad gestures. And the trackpad is actually really cool because where a Windows trackpad on a Windows laptop is just kind of left click or right click, with the gestures, if you do 2 fingers and then kind of press down on the trackpad, that equates to a right click because there's this thing called force touch. I don't know if I'm confusing a Jedi move or something like that with the trackpad or if that's the actual naming convention. But essentially what happens is you could use the trackpad to have like a single click. So if you press down once, it's 1 click. But then if you press down harder, that equates to another click for some other feature or whatever it may be. And I think that's customizable. So as a relatively new Mac OS end user, I don't actually know what the heck I'm doing there. I'm still stumbling around trying to figure out 1 click versus 2 click or 1 press versus harder press. It's just not really built into my muscle memory yet, but I think once I actually get the hang of it, it's gonna be really cool. And with all that to say, the trackpad, again, kind of gets that shiny, oily look after a while. I did go on Amazon and purchase a trackpad cover, so that way I can kind of save the trackpad from looking oily. Your boy has banana hands, and also, I like my French fries. Overall, I would have to say that the keyboard and the trackpad are phenomenal. Again, with the exceptions of the wear and tear of the shiny keyboard and the shiny trackpad that I just mentioned. So in general, my experience with everything on the MacBook Air has been fantastic. I can't say enough good things about it. And the same thing is going to continue to be true when I start to talk about the speakers. Let me tell you that the speakers on this computer are crazy good. I heard that the MacBook Pro has better speakers, but I can tell you that the MacBook Air with this 15-inch display version sounds really, really good. So I'm not gonna throw shade at those Windows laptop PCs, Dell XPS. Honestly, I'm just gonna have to say that the laptop sound quality on this MacBook Air puts those Windows machine laptops to shame. Now, I have had really good speakers in Windows laptops, like my Lenovo Yoga i9 a few years ago. That was a really good sounding laptop. It had a really good speaker system, but it was also twice the size of my MacBook Air. This MacBook Air is barely thicker than the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. And that says a lot because the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra is a really thin phone. All right, so there is no perfect device, and I would have to say that the Apple MacBook Air, the M4 edition for 2025, has done a really good job at being the all-around, everything, every day, every one computer. And so here I'm going to tell you about the things that I don't like about it. You already know about the fact that I don't like how the keyboard and the trackpad are eventually going to get that oily look. I just think that for the price, Apple needs to be putting better quality keyboard gloss or something onto the actual keyboard so that way it doesn't kind of fade off and give that kind of ugly, oily residue look. The next thing I don't like about the MacBook Air, or just kind of Mac devices in general, is the price. I've always kind of held off on buying a MacBook or a Mac computer or a Mac Mini because they're so expensive. For a super duper ultra supercalifragilistic expialidocious Mac machine, you're actually going to be paying no less than 1800 USD and up, meaning that that's the top tier technical configuration that that particular device could have. And for that same price on a Windows machine, you could truly get a super califragilisticexpialidociousness computer. That was really hard to say. The other two things that I don't like about the MacBook Air is going to be the fact that there is lacking of ports. There's literally 2 USB-C ports, and even though they are Thunderbolt 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, 8 or 9, or I can't remember, you will have to get kind of like a little hub like this, which is going to be using USB-C, and then you would have to connect other things into this. So for instance, if you wanted to connect your laptop to a different monitor, you'll have to purchase one of these or something similar. And also the fact that this MacBook Air doesn't have any type of SD card slot. So if you have a micro SD or one of the regular SD cards, you can't plug that in anywhere unless you have one of these, or again, something similar. It's just one extra thing that you're going to have to purchase. And I'm honestly not quite sure if Apple did that on purpose so that way they could sell their own product like this, so that way you can get extra ports, or if they just said, hey, we're only putting 2 USB-C ports in there. The OEM MagSafe charger, the kind of little magnetic port thing there, as well as the little brick, it's great. I mean, it does what it has to do. There isn't anything to write home about it. And so the last thing that I don't really like about the MacBook Air is more so a theory because of Apple's track record, is because they've made such a great laptop, which is this MacBook Air, I really feel like it's going to take some time for them to continue to innovate. Just kind of like how they do their iPhones. I mean, the iPhone X and 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 and the 15, they're all relatively the same design and iPhone. Sure, they get a tech spec bump every year, but I feel like because the MacBook Air is so well defined and Apple's been chipping away at making this kind of sculpture of a laptop, that the next iteration is only going to be a tech spec bump. Or as consumers, we're not going to see Apple pushing the envelope or pulling the thread with innovating their laptop. And that may be a Derek thing because of the fact that I like tech. I love tech. I have a video on YouTube all about tech. But the thing is Apple tends to get comfortable with a device that works really well. And because it works really well, I mean, they just kind of remake the same device for the next few years, half a decade sometimes, and then that's it. Then they'll kind of put something else out new. And I hope that's not the case, because if Apple continues to innovate with this MacBook Air for 2026, 27, 28, whatever, then they're going to have my money, because this laptop is great, but if they can continue to improve, then it's going to be amazing. Look at the iPad. The iPad barely changes. There are so many different iterations of the iPad in the last few years where it was just kind of the same iPad, but because it was so well refined, Apple didn't really find a need to change it until they wanted to be more competitive with the iPad Pro. I mean, how long did it take for an iPad Pro to come out? But again, this is all kind of subjective. This is kind of like thinking in Derek headspace. Apple is going to do what they're going to do, and people like me are probably going to buy it. All right, so at the end of the day, 6 weeks and 3 days later, I'd have to say that this is probably my favorite laptop that I've ever used. I would say it was my favorite computer ever used, but this thing right here, that's my favorite computer ever used. Which, by the way, this is my iBuyPower Slate 8 Mesh. Fantastic computer. There's going to be a link card showing up right here, or maybe over here, wherever that's going to be. And it's going to be my 6-month review on this iBuyPower Slate 8 Mesh. Okay, back to my MacBook. I want to say that this is going to be a computer that stays with me for a long time. I've heard that MacBooks tend to last forever, and I'm actually pretty excited to know the fact that I will be able to use this computer in years to come, especially because, again, Apple's probably not going to push the envelope with anything spectacular with the next iteration, but truly I am excited to be able to know that I'm going to have this laptop for the next few years. Another thing about this MacBook Air, again, just kind of in Derek headspace, is like, if the MacBook Air is so good at what it is in customization and just kind of what it does, why are the iPhones so boring? Now, in my experiences, if you are that person like I was 6 weeks ago, should you buy a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air? Again, that's going to be super subjective to what your needs are. For video editing, for daily tasks, for just kind of doing everyday computing things, the MacBook Air is going to do a really good job, especially if you opt in to get the 24GB RAM configuration. But all that to say is that I can't really compare the MacBook Pro to the MacBook Air because, one, I'm not rich enough to have both, and two, honestly, I would have to say that the MacBook Air is probably capable of doing what the MacBook Pro is able to do, but the MacBook Pro can probably do it ever so slightly better. You choose your pros and cons because it's your money, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.